Well, a warm welcome to everybody dialing in to this latest webinar hosted by Argus, and we are very happy to say sponsored by ClimeCo. The topic today is plastic credits, and we have some excellent speakers to talk on this subject, this very new and exciting area. We have Chris Parker from ClimeCo and his colleague as well, Amanda Hsieh, and Joao Sousa from the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. My name is Adam Nye. I am from the business development team here at Argus Media, working on our project for voluntary carbon offsets. And so for me personally, I think this is a very interesting topic to see this evolution of the concept of offsetting to be extended from the carbon world into the plastics world. So I think this is a very exciting and positive innovation, and I'm sure we're all interested to hear more about it. So I'm going to hand over to the speakers to introduce themselves and give us an insight into this extremely fascinating area. So Chris, can I ask you to start with just telling us a few lines about yourself?
Sure, yeah, thanks. So I'm Chris Parker. I'm director of ClimeCo's plastic program, which was launched last February to develop projects around the world to tackle the plastic pollution crisis, which we'll get into, of course, a little bit later. I'm coming into this work with a background in financial markets, environmental commodity markets, ESG advisory, and also conservation and corporate development, all sort of mixed together to pursue this.
Thank you, Amanda. How about yourself?
Hi everyone. My name is Amanda Hsieh. I'm the Vice President of ESG, Environmental Social Governance at ClimeCo. I help businesses strategize around ESG, improve their performance, and communicate it out. I'm also the co-host of the ESG Decoded podcast and a steering committee member of the Texas Sustainable Business Network. Thank you everyone for joining us to learn about plastic credits. Thank you, Argus, for hosting.
Joao.
Hi all, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Joao Sousa. I'm a biotech engineer. I've been working for 23 years in problem solving across several industries: oil and gas, pharmaceutical, textile, food. And lately, more related with environment, I've been focused on plastics for the last 8 years, working upstream, from design of polymers all the way down to circular solutions for small and developing states, and also by determining plastic footprint per country as a means of quantification that is always the first step towards the solution at the national level. Also doing some contribution now for the Global Binding Agreement in several departments. And thank you very, very much for listening.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Well, let's get started. I think, Joao, you have a few slides you'd like to share with us just to take us through just to help orientate us on the subject. So why don't I just hand over to you?
Okay. So here we are. I work for the International Union for Conservation of Nature and in the Oceans team, where we developed and started the Close the Plastic Tap program. Close the plastic tap because it makes sense that we first close the tap and then we address the problems that we have. We are firm believers that this is the first step to actually solve the crisis. So of course, this all starts to understand how come this convenient society led us to the situation that we are. And it's in a way kind of strange, and I will talk more ahead about this slide and this idea that it's incredible the money that is spent to produce something then at the end has not even a neutral value. It has actually a negative value. And this led to the situation you can see on the right-hand side. This is a landfill that was constructed above mangrove. And basically what you see, of course, in white, it's not snow. Unfortunately, it's plastics. So the mangrove was filled first with tires, and then this is just a deposit just for plastics, nothing else. So this is part of the work we do at IUCN. We started with microplastics in the ocean, and we try to understand from the work done by Jenna Jambek, trying to understand the relation of macro and microplastics when she determined that around 12 million tons a year would enter the oceans. And we understand that we need to have a quantification about microplastics in all forms, from paint to road paint to tires to whatever, trying to understand if actually that number was accurate or would express these particles that were not accounted for. So this was basically our first work to understand what is the plastic footprint. So then we actually start to do full quantification of basins. We did the entire Baltic, understanding the contribution of riparian states per sector, per polymer type, per tonnage per year, what was the contribution and what was the legacy of plastic in this basin. Then we also did for the entire Mediterranean, where we calculated per country also, but this time not only riparian countries, but also landlocked countries like Switzerland, that contributes to Mediterranean pollution via the Rhone, or Sudan, that contributes to the Mediterranean via the Nile. This was an exhaustive exercise, but we need to start to have these numbers so we understand what we're dealing with. We also have some work that we did research in Azores. Although it's not mentioned here, we did the first research to understand possible impacts in ice formation and ice melting from high concentrations of plastic in the water in the North Pole region. And we are now aiming most of our projects for small island developing states, both in Caribbean, Pacific, and also in the Mediterranean. So basically, we understood that a lot of these communities and these countries are very sensitive to pollution, and the sectors that actually contribute most to pollution are the ones that felt more the impacts of this. We understand by this graph it's a graph that shows basically an average EU citizen that lives in a country where we have a good management, let's say, or a fair good management of plastic. If one citizen in Europe takes 1 week holidays in an island with mismanaged plastic systems, 2/3 of his total plastic footprint per year comes from that week, which is absolutely impressive. We call this the tourist plastic trap. So this is our projects are now running. We come to an island, and let me just pass to the next slide because it's more interesting than this one, where we do a sector analysis to try to understand all the material flow analysis regarding plastic, everything that comes into the country, produced in the country, consumed in the country, disposed in the country, and everything that is outside this equation is a leakage. Then we try to understand the streams of plastic, if they are easily recyclable or non-recyclable. In this case, non-recyclable means non-financially recyclable, because in theory or chemically, all plastics are recyclable. And then from here, either we understand the creation of new value chains, or we try to see the possibility of addressing the plastic in other forms, like waste to energy, if it makes sense or not. This, of course, is coupled with the business case and transformation or adaptation of legislation, and the idea is to have a scalable, replicable global blueprint to address this. So the idea that we work in small island developing states, of course, is to generate knowledge for the states. We support government, of course, and private sector. The idea is that we can create new value chains by which they have products that are made from this plastic that it's basically useful. And in this case, we extend a bit more the life of plastic because, as we all know, at the end, most of this plastic will end up in the landfill anyway, and basically trying to improve waste management conditions in these countries. So very briefly, on the left-hand side, we have the solutions that we proposed, and then it's discussed in each country using working groups what would be the most interesting product to produce with their own waste, to create those products locally and to develop small units, depending, of course, on the size of the country and on the profile of plastic that they have. If they have more PET or HDPE, then we bring these solutions to the countries. And on the right-hand side is now being finalized the Deplastify tool, which is a tool by which you basically enter all your data from your country, and the tool will identify what is the most suitable technology to use the plastic that cannot be easily recycled. Just one more slide or two. So this is the Babel Tower and holistic approach. This is what we do at IUCN, is trying to see if we can all speak the same language when it comes to plastics. That's why we're now moving so strong, contributing to the Global Binding Agreement. and the discussions, trying to see if everything is holistic, inclusive, and this is the best way. Is this we all of us speak the same language. So thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.
Thank you, Joao. Chris, do you want to follow on from that?
What I was going to go through is sort of an introduction, a one-on-one discussion about plastic credits. I think it's something that probably a lot of people have heard of, don't really know much about, don't know what really happens on the ground with projects that are creating plastic credits. And then also give a discussion on ClimeCo's plastic credit program, how we're using the mechanism to finance projects, and then give a snapshot of a few projects that we have on the ground operating right now to give people some real, a real look at some projects that are already underway. Real quick though, brief background on ClimeCo. Has been in business since 2009. Today we have about 60 team members. We work in development and advisory and for transactions in different environmental commodities. We do a lot of work in the carbon offset space and carbon sequestration projects. We have a big focus now on reforestation and more specifically mangrove restoration projects to produce carbon offsets. And then we also do similar projects development for renewable energy certificates. And of course, with my role, we've gone as of last year into plastic credits. And then we also have an ESG policy and strategy consulting team, which works directly with corporates and brands around sustainability strategy and implementation and communications. And to sort of go along with a little bit of what Hsieh was talking about, sort of the level of the ocean plastic pollution. So some generally accepted stats on the left. I like to show the picture here on the right because it's a photo I took with my iPhone on a shoreline in the Ivory Coast, and we were working there. This shoreline was cleared the day before, and we came back 24 hours later, and that amount of plastic pollution came back onto the land from the ocean. And so in just 24 hours, that new material was deposited back on the land from the ocean, which ironically began as ocean-bound plastic from a land source. So about plastic credits, probably most of the attendees here today are pretty familiar with carbon offsets and carbon credits. In a very basic way of thinking, plastic credits are like a offset for plastic, but once you learn about really what they're trying to achieve and the attributes that come from the project themselves, there's really a lot more to it. It's a much deeper discussion, especially with the community and social initiatives that are working around the projects. But like carbon credits, plastic credits provide a structured, verified finance mechanism for corporations to be able to support projects on the ground. Again, like carbon credits, every credit for plastic equals 1 ton of material that was either removed from the environment or recycled. That was previously in an unproductive source, and so it's 1 credit equals 1 metric ton of material. The goal for credits is really to drive private sector funding to frontline projects on the ground that otherwise would have to rely on the more traditional philanthropic model. And I think today the level of the plastic pollution crisis around the world is I think beyond the scope of government and philanthropy to tackle on its own. We need more solutions for the private sector to contribute directly, and this gives an accountable, transparent way to do so. Today, there are 2 standards for projects to work from. Both are public-facing and independent of the projects themselves. one being from the Vera registry, which is one of the primary carbon credit organizations, and then also the second one being the ocean-bound plastic certification, which is from a French nonprofit called Zero Plastic Oceans. Both are public-facing independent protocols that projects have to adhere to, have to provide lots of documentation for, and to get certified to be able to issue credits on one of the two registries. Both require third-party audits for verification as part of the process. So it's not just a firm like ClimeCo saying that this is the work that's being done or the project. There's the two layers of having to adhere to the independent protocol from the standard, and then the third-party verification, which has to happen before credits can get issued initially, and then also there's an annual audit as well. Very similar again to carbon credits. When plastic credits get issued from a project, they get listed on one of the registries, and every ton gets an individual serial number, which gets recorded and tracked for the public to see. And then when a sponsoring company transacts a credit, it gets retired in that name, so it can't get sold again, avoids double counting. And that information is also available to any stakeholders in the world to see exactly who sponsored it. And then each credit will show where the plastic came from, the source, who sponsored it, and even sometimes details is we can go down to particular plastic types, and even if it came from a shoreline or a river, we have the ability to drill down to that. The plastic credit program at ClimeCo is building really a global portfolio of projects. We have current operations in Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Ivory Coast, and Kenya, with upcoming pipeline projects in the works for India, Indonesia, another possible West African location, and then a couple in the Americas too. Really providing a diversity for not just for geography, but also of the different impacts over the list of projects, and also next life solutions as well. Our program has a zero landfill policy, meaning that all of the material that we are recovering from the environment is either going to be recycled, repurposed, or co-processed, or possibly a mix. So with any of the material, no matter its condition or polymer type, it's going to get some sort of next life solution. So we're not just removing material and just sort of wastefully putting it to a landfill, especially when we're working in areas that the landfills are largely mismanaged and inadequate in the first place, and so we don't want to risk the leakage back into the environment. With all of our projects, there's the initial goal of environmental and ecosystem restoration, and that involves physically removing this plastic material from environments that's really damaging biodiversity, and also the communities themselves. Many places look like the photo on the left there of just mixed environmental mismanaged plastic. That picture is actually in a new operations in Cambodia. But while we are removing this material from the environment, we're very often building new waste management infrastructure at the same time. And so we're often working in areas that have zero or very little functioning waste management. So we're building collection centers, installing bins, creating sorting and processing capabilities. So, in many of these locations, without this, there'd be really nothing feasible to do with all this material. And so we have to build the infrastructure at the same time. And then longer term, we're going to build and scale repurposing and recycling capacity if possible. So we start more of a, even a higher state of productivity from the material, and try and create some circular solutions in it. All the projects have a big focus on the human aspect of it, meaning the initiatives around community, social, the economic opportunities to the workers, and also providing healthcare benefits sometimes, and also proving that there's no child labor, that there's adequate working conditions are all part of that. And then another part of my role is finding the right supporting company to the right project. And so I'm sort of playing matchmaker of the right project to the right corporation or right business. And oftentimes that comes with providing the right ESG or CSR communications content. So a supporting company gets to show the real support that they provided, and find the best way to tell that story to their stakeholders. All of our projects go through an SDG scoring assessment. We use what's called the SDG Action Manager, which is an independent assessment tool created by Global Compact and B Lab. And so once the project goes through this assessment, it gets a quantitative score by SDG, and that again can be used by a supporting company in their communications. So let me, I was going to give a snapshot of I think 4 different projects quickly, just to sort of give a real look at some of these projects. The first one being called Ton to Ton, which is operating in Vietnam and Cambodia. They focus largely on removing non-recyclable, no-value plastic, that if they weren't removing the material that they are, it simply wouldn't get done, because no one has an incentive to remove it because it doesn't have any market value, and they also wouldn't be able to remove this material and do the work that they're doing and hire the people and buy the equipment if it wasn't for the funding that's coming from the plastic credits. That's really the only way that Ton to Ton's model can work. ClimeCo and Ton to Ton brought the first plastic credit, the world's first, last summer from one of the 2 registries, and did the world's first transaction for a plastic credit with Ton to Ton. And then they have a recent really productive campaign that launched recently in Cambodia that was in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment and then UN Habitat and UNDP, and also school outreach and education programs through CIFA. Ton to Ton also hires majority female workers, providing financial opportunity in Vietnam right now, and also trying to get a majority of female workers in the Cambodia operations as well, providing adequate protective equipment, and also have a health policy that is supplied by the project, where it's really a health benefit that these workers, given their skill level and education and poverty level, probably wouldn't be able to obtain otherwise. Ton to Ton in both Vietnam and Cambodia currently, the materials go into a waste to energy application in cement production, and so it's used as an alternative to fossil fuel in each location, and so there's a greenhouse gas benefit to this application, and then also after that process, the material is used in the actual cement mix, and so really nothing goes to waste. But then longer term, we're building the repurposing and recycling capacity as well. But the waste energy is where we've started. Another project that's on the ground, up and running, Hsieh in Malaysia, is actually a recycling business, and so they provide recycled material to industry, but through the plastic credit mechanism, they're able to remove material in more remote locations, more expensive locations that without it wouldn't really be economically feasible for their business. And so they're working in shorelines, waterways, and have some islands designated now to remove material as well. That's going to get funded through the through the plastic credit mechanism. Our third project to show is Enaleia, which is actually a Greek-based organization that's been operating in the Mediterranean for the past several years, and they work very closely with the fishing community, providing education and a financial income structure where the fishermen can remove and return plastic that they catch either on purpose or by accident back to port. And so instead of just simply throwing the material back into the sea, because that's the easy, cheap thing to do, they have financial incentive to bring it back. And in that process, they're actually helping to restore their own fishery while they're doing that, because fisheries all over the world are getting damaged by the level of plastic pollution. So there's the short-term economic benefit through additional income for the fishermen, and the longer-term ecosystem restoration aspect to it. And now we're working with Enaleia to do an expansion project to take their model that's worked in the Mediterranean very well and do it on coastal Kenya. And so working with fishing communities in Kenya, and then getting that material also recycled in Nairobi and also repurposed into next life items, probably for construction. And the last project to take a look at is it's called the Way Project, and it's in the Ivory Coast. They are removing, again, non-recyclable, no-value plastic on coastal Cote d'Ivoire, and they have a proprietary application where they remove this ocean-bound plastic and process it in their own factory into these construction bricks, which are shown in the photo there, and they snap together sort of like giant Legos, and they're 100% repurposed plastic. And then the project works directly with UNICEF to build schools out of these, and they've built 200 classrooms so far, have a plan to build another 600 with the UNICEF partnership, all made from these repurposed bricks. And then also the program has what's called the Way methodology, which empowers and hires all female workers and does job training, worker rights advocacy, teaching job skills for hopefully an upcoming recycling industry, and also childcare and healthcare benefits as well. And so that's a snapshot of 2 projects in Southeast Asia, 2 in Africa, which I hope is helpful to everyone get a sort of a real life look at some of these projects. And now I will turn over the rest of our talk here to my colleague Amanda to talk about the ESG applications.
Chris, thank you so much. What I wanted to do is just share with folks, why should companies be interested in addressing plastics, and a little bit of high level of how do you get started if you're interested in tackling this. I think one of the things that we're all very excited about, and Joao hinted at, is the UN the Treaty on Plastic Pollution. This was in March, signed by the UN member nations. It's a commitment to develop a legally binding agreement to address the full life cycle of plastics from the source all the way to the ocean. And they have what I think is a relatively quick timeline to get a draft agreement in place, which is the end of 2024. So we'll be monitoring and excited to see what comes out of that. But it's really quite a quick timeline if you think about it, how that might be then influencing policy in 25, 26, 27, before the end of this decade. And I don't want to go over all these, but I just want to highlight maybe 2 other organizations or initiatives that I think folks should be aware of. And another one is the Plastic Solutions Investor Alliance. It was launched in 2020 and has over 50 investors with trillions of dollars in assets in management. And they've been quite successful in their approach to engaging issuers with either shareholder engagement or resolutions. And they were the ones who were convinced McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts to stop using styrofoam cups. They convinced Starbucks to phase out those plastic straws. They convinced Kraft Heinz and Mondelez to make packaging recyclable. They also convinced plastic producers such as Chevron, ExxonMobil, Eastman, Westlake, Oxy, Dow to start reporting the spills of plastic pellets. And right now, their current focus is on addressing our problem with plastic packaging. And I think the last one I want to highlight on this slide is the Plastic Pack Network, which is a lot of led by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, their work with circular economy. This pact has different regions, and I'll just talk a little bit about what they've accomplished so far in the U.S. Plastic Pact. They have 4 main goals there. One is to define a list of plastic packaging that's problematic or unnecessary, and basically take steps to eliminate them by 2025. Again, pretty quick timeline if you think about it. And they've already identified that list includes things like cutlery and plastic straws, and also different types of single-use packaging, which have easily substitutable alternatives. Another goal that they're shooting for is to make sure that all plastic packaging is 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable, again, by 2025. They want to improve recycling rates as well, and also making sure that how we're sourcing plastics is increased as well. I know everyone can search for that information later on, and there's obviously other drivers, as I think Joao and Chris have spoken about, how plastic pollution affects the lives of community members, and also the benefits, the social and community and environmental co-benefits that dealing with the plastic pollution problem can create. I think next logical question that happens a lot is, well, how do I go about dealing with this big problem? It feels similar maybe to addressing the climate crisis. Where do I get started if I'm interested? How does plastic credits fit into all of this? And as I think Joao hinted at this and went into their work, the first thing is to understand how much, what is your footprint? And anyone who's involved with carbon management will also understand this as what is your greenhouse gas baseline. So let's figure out what is your baseline plastic footprint. What types of plastic are you using? How much? What are they being used for? Where do they end up in? Whether that's in recycling and waste to energy, or is it leaked out into the environment, causing the pollution problem that we have? The next step is once you know where you are, setting that goal of where do you want to get to mobilize the organization to start striving for that. And in this slide, I've given some examples of potential goals or areas that a company may want to address, such as reducing the percentage of virgin material used, such as reducing how much leakage is out there, reducing or eliminating unnecessary plastics. What we've learned is that, yes, part of it is we need to clean up the mess that we've made, but part of it is also we need to turn off, as Joao said, kind of turn off the tap. And I think that the other thing that we should focus on, and part of that strategy, is looking at how we can redesign. And this is where I think it's fun, because it allows for more innovation, like using plastic credits, thinking outside the box in design, developing alternative materials, looking at your process to see where are those, if we think of lean manufacturing or kind of that lean concept of where do we not need this anymore. So hopefully this is some easy ways to think about how to tackle this big problem that we have in a more tangible way. Adam, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Joao and Chris as well. That's wonderful, and that is a lot of information. I have quite a list of questions. I'm going to start with Joao, just to help us picture a little bit the supply side of the problem a little bit better. You talked about the tourist trap, and I think the majority of the supply problem is coming through coastal mismanagement of plastics. Can you just help us visualize that a little bit better? And how does that mechanism of the tourist trap work? And what are the other, let's say, culprits? What are the other sort of the main supply sources of waste plastic into the oceans? And I guess compounding a lot of questions here into one, how easy is it? I guess I can see some parallels between the avoidance and reduction concept in carbon and the removals concept in carbon. How easy is it to close the tap and to have an impact on the supply side of the problem?
I will start with the last ones.
Sorry, that was 4 questions.
No, because the first ones I don't remember, so I'm going to start with the last one. No, basically, actually, preventing is less costly to start with. And preventing can have many forms. I'm not going to advocate reduction of production on this discussion, this is part of the binding agreement, reduction of production and also consumption. And there's not one culprit. I usually start by saying that plastic is not even a product. Plastic is a family of products. So you don't have one problem, you have a family of problems. So you will have a family of solutions, most probably, of course. So the first point being that we need to understand that we are all into this. From us that buy it, from the ones that discard it, from the ones that put it in the market in the first place, and the ones that think that good waste management practice to incinerate everything. I've been traveling around the world, especially small and developing states, and understanding that even the most pristine places, like I was now in Principe Islands, as I mentioned, and understanding that some of the communities are now moving a bit from where we in some countries in Europe started around the 40s, 50s, moving into products that are buying products in supermarkets full of sugar and wrapped in plastics. And of course, the kids deserve to eat whatever pleases them. But at the same time, we have to understand one thing. If we cannot process plastic in a sound, managing way, process, transform, not even export it, because you might say, like, if you cannot process it, you can export it to somewhere else. And of course, you have your waiver from Barcelona, Stockholm, Rotterdam Convention saying that you can export, although it's plastic. But in some countries, even the cost of transport is basically prohibitive, and transport to where? Who's going to accept it? So rule of the thumb is bring in, bring out. If you cannot process something, don't allow it in the first place to go to an island. I've been seeing now, because I've seen this 8 years ago in Manila, this huge amount of single doses of this sachet or boppets that you have toothpaste, ketchup, and whatever the company, because I had a conversation with companies, they're defending this unidose because they cannot afford 1 kilo. Of course, if you understand that the price per gram is absolutely horrible, you understand there's something strange here. But now, the island where I was, they even have whiskey in small sachet, just whiskey in plastic. And of course, you just drink one and throw it away. So it's complex, but please don't let me go away from your questions. It's a complex problem.
Yeah, I can see that. And Chris, it's I understand it's been around about 1 year now since the first plastic credit issued that I think you mentioned there on the slides on the ton-to-ton project. And I think you've recently had the first offset issued by Vera. So there's been a nice milestone there in around about 1 year. How happy are you with the progress that you've had? Let's say the plastic offset market, if you can call it that, as a concept has progressed in that year. What would your evaluation be of how far you've come? It's obviously a big problem in a short period of time. Do you think how would you evaluate that year so far?
I guess in a few ways. One, meaning since this marketplace, a year and a half, and our program also a year and a half ago, both kind of started from zero. There was everywhere to go was up. It's been very positive to see the interest around the plastic credit. Using sort of the successes that have come from carbon, especially around around reforestation for carbon, using that's the same principles to do the same thing with plastic. And then it's been heartening to see when you're going on location in Africa or Asia, working directly in the project and seeing the day-to-day impact and the day-to-day benefits that are coming through the funding of the plastic credits, and the economic opportunities of the workers who are oftentimes the very people who are suffering the most from the plastic pollution. And so I know that it works. It's today it's a matter of just more and more education to a new instrument, a new concept. But I'm also very impatient as a sort of an ocean conservationist by DNA. Nothing can happen fast enough because the problem is immense and only growing, and especially like tourism and island locations that have been sort of on pause for the past couple of years as global tourism stopped. Now that's all about to come back. So there's about to be a wave of plastic pollution in beautiful beaches and reefs and places that we love. So I still can't move fast enough despite the early victories.
And in another, I guess, a follow-up question, one of the carbon offset space has obviously run up with a lot of, let's say, image problems, as you often get with new innovations and new markets, and you have the sort of the typical resistance to some. Well, they have some integrity issues with some of the projects, and accusations of greenwashing for some participants, which is something you can debate about, and it typically comes up with new markets. How has the plastic offset space market had similar issues around that, or is that something you would anticipate being a problem to work through? Or are there some lessons you can already draw from the development of the carbon offset space?
Yeah, well, thankfully, since it took about 15 years or so for the carbon credit market to develop to what it is today, and it wasn't always as robust as it is today. We've certainly gotten to start at a better spot out of the gate for plastic, and especially our program is focused only on independent public methodologies that require high levels of documented traceability, high levels of documented stakeholder engagement, and so it's very much a risk management exercise. And I also, when I have conversations to new people about plastic credits, I want them to think. I don't want them to think of it as a simple offsetting exercise. That they can just buy some credits and sort of take care of their plastic problem that way. A company, no matter what their business is, plastic is complicated on how they use it, and also what the solutions are. And usually that's as Joao said, a family of solutions. And so plastic credits have a few specific ways to provide a lot of impact and channel funds that otherwise probably wouldn't find their way to these projects. But that, as I said before, once people and companies learn about these projects, it's so much more than just simple plastic removal or plastic offsetting exercise. The social community sort of like structural benefits that come out of it are a much bigger story to tell. So that's what I kind of want people to take away from it.
Great. Chris, thank you. Amanda, a little bit the view from the corporate side. You've obviously experienced this from IKEA, which we're all familiar with, and I'm sure they are. This is something that I would imagine they're engaged in. Certainly, they seem probably part of the issue. What is more broadly? What is pushing corporates to address this problem? Where are the drivers coming from? Again, I don't know if you can draw parallels with what's happening in carbon, where sort of investor pressure and consumer pressure, the greenhouse gas issue in the environment is obviously very well publicized. Where are the similar pressures on corporates coming from in the plastics area?
I want to say a lot of the same stakeholders who understand the damage that excessive greenhouse gas emissions have done to our climate and to our economies. It's a lot of the same stakeholders. So we see pressure on the policy side. We see pressure from NGOs. We see consumers saying that, we want to buy more sustainable products, and the newer generation is much, much more aware of this. Investors, I mentioned, that investor alliance are pushing via shareholder engagement, shareholder resolutions. You see that the UN Principles of Responsible Investment, they have guidelines of how their signatory members should, try to address plastic in their portfolios. And we also see, like the US PAC and other US Plastic PAC and other regional PACs we see companies trying to address it and of the industry solution. So if you're not in there, most likely one of your peers is. So that brings competition, right? Of what are you doing if the rest of your peers or the leadership in your market are on board here and trying to figure out what to do. So I think there's many reasons, reasons with money behind them of why companies are starting to look at plastic credits, try to figure out a holistic plastic solution, and understand, I think as Joao and Chris have mentioned, it's not one thing only. It's going to take a holistic set of solutions, and we need to get started now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, everybody. I think now we will open it up more widely to questioning. That's enough from me. So let's see. We have some questions here from the audience.